I am, as always, joined by Dr. Carl Mack. And this Friday, we are joined by Pastor Anthony Galloway. I'd like to bring both of them right into the conversation. Good morning, gentlemen. I hope the day is going well. It's early where you are. How goes the day?
Very well, very well. Brother Galloway, good morning. Brother Dixon, good morning to you. Happy Friday.
Good morning to all.
Good morning. I want us to begin this morning with COVID-19. Dr. Mack, you and I have had ongoing conversations about us following the science and what does getting back to normal look like? There's some updates from the CDC, as well as the possibility of moving the nation towards some sense of normalcy. But there's a lot of caution that has been given by experts. The CDC may join the COVID rollback, but there are experts who are weighing in saying that this is not the time. It is too soon to declare victory over the pandemic. As of February 16th, vaccinations were at 516,988 vaccinations on that single day, which is a feat to behold. 65% of the United States is fully vaccinated. 214.2 million Americans are fully vaccinated. On the flip side of that information, 2,212 deaths occurred on that same day. We are averaging somewhere around that amount of death every day. That's almost a 9/11 happening every day. But experts are saying that we may be seeing, light at the end of the tunnel. Let me begin with you, Pastor Galloway. Thank you for joining us. What are your thoughts about this juxtaposition between the quote unquote experts, also, political leaders? This is not just the doctors who are, this is mainly our political leaders who are pushing to move us towards some normalcy, but we do still have a staggering amount of death happening.
Well, it's interesting. As a leader of a church parish, right? One of the things that we are struggling with is the same thing. Folks are wanting to be done. They want to get back together. They want to grab a sense of that, and it's hard because we have to keep the numbers and the spread right in front of us, especially as before we were having this conversation. It was that as long as I'm vaccinated and boosted, then I have all the best protections out there and I can be relatively sure. But now we're moving towards something, treating this like the flu. And some countries have moved to that space and others haven't. Now, it's a very different story where I am. 98% of my congregation is fully vaccinated and boosted. And the other percentage that's there is made up a lot of young little kids who can't get vaccinated yet. So they're having a very different conversation than just a few blocks over and just a few counties over. And so, part of my wondering is there some places where that match that 65%, some match it, or some are much better than others. And there's this sense of trying to do that. However, we absolutely know that many in our congregation, even if when we open up, because the church has not yet voted to open up yet for in-person worship, so I'm just using that context just to say that I get the urge, and there's this general urge of trying to mitigate that. However, are we ready to move into a space where we treat this as a flu, especially given that Omicron has a cousin that is creeping out in many different parts of the country that is more contagious and possibly, as they continue to study it, possibly having more severe symptoms than Omicron.
Dr. Mack.
Yeah, I think, again, the more this thing mutates, and it appears now with this new strand that the pastor is talking about, I don't know what that's like, but ultimately, I think the fear, well, let me say, clearly the data is showing a downward trend. And, it's 2,000 deaths a day, horrific, absolutely. But in comparison to what was going on earlier, the data, the trends itself appears to show that we're coming out of this thing. And I think that becomes the very difficult question. What does fully coming out of this and looking like normalcy, what does that really look like? And I've been tasked with that question many times myself. And just as I followed the science when this thing started, I'm going to follow the science now, especially in light of being vaccinated, being boosted. Now, am I acting as though Superman, I got this protective shield around me and it cannot happen? No. But, I am, for the most part, treating it as I would a cold or a flu, with the exception that, do I still mask up when I go? Yeah, I do. But is there a thought inside of me that I am as terrified of COVID as I once was, given the data? And the answer, quite frankly, is no, I am not. Not at this point, especially in light of the science and the data.
Yeah, I mean, for those of us who are vaccinated and boosted, and then there are those of us with complicated situations like you described, Pastor Galloway. You have families with smaller kids, much like myself. My youngest, 4 years old, he's not old enough to get vaccinated yet. And so, my household, we're still living in like full pandemic mode. 4 out of 5 on our side isn't enough. But there's a complicated mix of how do you proceed forward as a society when there's a vulnerable population who hasn't even been vaccinated yet?
Well, this is an important one for us in our congregation, in just that, we've got folks, we're overrepresented with the risk factors that become complicated, even if you're vaccinated and boosted. And so, and we were in a quandary for ourselves. We pulled our kids from school, as cases were going up in their school district in huge ways. And then my kids contracted COVID. They ended up being asymptomatic. My wife contracted COVID and was symptomatic. For some reason, I remain have tested negative consistently because I test regularly because of my engagement and with people as a pastor. And so I have never had COVID. And so, I was in the same household. I was doing the same things. And so, even we have as to Dr. Mack's point, have adjusted a little bit. However, we still have my grandmother who's vaccinated, boosted, fully protected, doing all the protocols she can. But if she gets COVID, even the less virulent Omicron strain, she's going to have major complications. And we even lost a major one of our leaders here in Minnesota, who has been on the ground. I know Sister Georgia, covered, his work, Brother Melvin, and he was, protected. So there's still this looming piece that is going to have us adjust to, as Dr. Mack alluded to, normal is not going to look like normal did before. Normal's still going to have to come with this level of protection. But quite frankly, we were trying to convince folks of this with the flu virus to get the flu vaccine even before COVID was here. And that same group of population is still at risk now, and we're still having to take that into account. And quite frankly, with new options, I don't think my older population is going to return to in-person worship anytime soon. I think they're going to remain online, just as an exemplar.
Yeah, and Pastor Galloway and Ben, when we think about the definition of herd immunity, right? I'm literally looking at the definition now, and I'd like to read it to us and before I give this comparison. But it says herd immunity is resistant to the spread of an infectious disease within a population that is based on pre-existent immunity of a high proportion of individuals as a result of previous infections or vaccinations. And so in its quintessential meaning, that is exactly what we're looking at now. We're looking at the fact that a higher population who has had it or has been vaccinated, we have gotten to a higher population of us who have been vaccinated. There is a higher population of those of us who have had it. We've watched this thing mutate from a more deadly impact to one that is far more contagious, but not as deadly. So given that, a lot more of us have had it. A lot more of us have been treated for it. And so that begins to lessen the impact of it. And so the comparison I'll have is, what normal looks like. I think we all can remember in our lifetime when we would go to the airport, you could literally walk up to the gate.
Yeah.
And after 9/11, that all changed. But now we've gotten used to that new normal where our loved ones used to literally be standing right there at the gate when we walk off the plane or when we board that plane. And now they're waiting at a security area, in which we can't breach. So that becomes our new normal. But have we adjusted to that? Does that seem normal now? Absolutely, it seems normal now. It's hard for me to remember when I used to be able to walk to the gate and greet my loved one as they boarded the plane or as they're coming off the plane. That seems so foreign to me because this has become our new.
Yeah, I mean, to both of your points, the new normal. Here's my question then, because the things that are being targeted by political leaders to get us back to their sense of normal are the very things that could exacerbate the pandemic even further. I'll give you specific examples. They're really pushing against mask mandates. Like that's one of the main things they're trying to say is like, we should get rid of these mask mandates. Whereas I'm a firm believer that needs to be a part of our new normal, because that's how we're going to keep these variants from popping up and setting us back. And then two, they're targeting vaccine mandates. Those are the things that would help us get to a new sense of normal. I'm fearful that they're targeting the very things that are going to keep us in this kind of state of survival where we're guessing what's next because they're making a bad decision on the vaccine mandates and the mask mandates. From my perspective, I would love to hear from both of you, Pastor Galloway first.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because it's shifting who's enforcing those things, right? So we will all continue to have a requirement for masking. We will continue to actually have proof of vaccination for participation in service. This is something that a lot of the areas, I think what I'm seeing is a shift in this shift is causing a predictability of where you're going to see these things. So in the metropolitan areas that I serve and live in, those cities are taking up the continuing requirement for masking. Restaurants are doing very similar. You're going to see who's going where, but it's also going to make predictable where we're going to see the proliferation of continued spread. And right now we have areas where vaccination rates are much different than not just the national average, but the city averages. And unfortunately, those are starting to follow political lines as well. And so I'm already hearing folks saying, I'm not going to certain places because nobody's wearing masks and nobody seems to be taking that seriously there, and I'm going to stay out of there. And so one of the interesting things I'm watching is starting to see how this begins to shape landscapes. The challenge that we have is a lot of the areas that are not continuing these, even though others may be relaxing, that aren't continuing these are also in areas in which there's not enough hospital coverage, at least in our state. And so the places that we see the spread going, not only amongst unvaccinated, but not keeping the mask mandate spaces, are the places where we're most concerned that there's not enough hospital coverage to treat the folks in those particular areas. So it's causing some different conversations to happen.
Yeah, and so Ben, to the point of vaccine mandates and mask mandates, again, Brother Ben and Pastor, when we all first talked about this, we were absolutely following the science and we were following what we were watching. And so if one is to believe that herd immunity is a realism from science, that again, the more this thing mutates and maybe the less deadly it gets, the more our body builds up a natural kind of immunity to it. So if indeed these things are the case, and now we're watching for sure the death toll go down, the hospitalization goes down, the amount of people that are infected and having very serious complications, we're watching these things go down. So at that point, if I'm not seeing the type of devastation that we saw when COVID-19 hits, I am all in favor of people who say, look, you don't mandate this to me. I don't take flu shots. And if somebody demanded that I had to take a flu shot, I feel some kind of way about it. But now trust and believe, if there was a strand of flu that was coming out that had the level of devastation that I could clearly see all over this country, without question, I would do it. So to the pastor's point, I think that as we return to normalcy, you remove the mandates. You remove the mandates on vaccination because so many of us have now gotten it. But now if you see an uptick in it, trust and believe, and there's a new vaccination that comes out, I'll be the first in line to do it. But at this point, given where we are now versus from whence we came and the science of it all, yeah, I'm in favor of removing the mask, making it, that's your choice at this point.
Are we looking at the same data? I'm over here squirming because I'm like, are we looking at the same data, Dr. Mack? I love you.
Okay.
Dwayne, put up the John Hopkins data again.
Sure.
The B-roll, because 2,300 deaths a day, that's not normal, man. That's a 9/11 every day.
But Ben, when that data rolls by, I want you to notice the graph. See, the trend is when you saying, is the data showing that we're in a downward trajectory where we're coming off the highs of it? That's what the trend is. That's what tells you whether or not you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. When you watch that graph and the number of deaths start coming down. Now, again, I'm certainly not minimizing 2,000 plus deaths a day. See,
hold it right there, Dwayne, right there.
But
slide it back just a little.
Let it roll. Because again, if we're talking about, see, look at that graph. You're on the downward side of that, right? And if that's what we're seeing, I'm okay, because it says that all the things that we did in the past to get through this pandemic, it has worked. Now, could it have worked more efficiently, better, if all of us had joined in at the very beginning? Absolutely. That's not the case. But based on what happened, the number of vaccines that people, the number of folks of us who were vaccinated, fully boosted, the number of us who were practicing social distancing, the number of us who were wearing masks, we're now seeing the trend go down. That's what I'm saying.
You know what? My problem, here's my problem. Yeah. My problem is that my baseline, I've not moved my baseline from the beginning of the pandemic, because even at the beginning of the pandemic, we were shocked when we had our first day of 1,000 people who died on a single day. Yes, see, that's my point of reference. We were shocked when we crossed 100,000 dead. Yes. And what happens is a level of desensitization because of necessity. We have to absorb this new trauma so that we can have some sense of normal and go on about our life. But I see the graph and the trend going down, but I firmly believe at 2,300 or 2,200 deaths a day, this is not the time to take off a mask or a mask mandate, or to be, especially because of, look at the main target. The main target are our schools. Our schools are the ones that are being targeted to say, take off these masks from our kids' faces and whatever the case may be for the vaccine mandates. This is a very precarious point. I don't think we're at an inflection point where we can smoothly sail out of this. And if we're telling people to take off their mask right now, we could be right back where we started.
Yeah, but that's the question that we started with you and Pastor Galloway. That's the question we started with. What does normal look like? At what point do we feel that we've gotten through this thing? Because to some degree, it's no different than the atrocities that have happened to us as a people through medicine and science, right? We're still traumatized by that to the point that we don't trust medicine and science to a large degree because of what happened in our past and because of the devastation that was COVID-19. There's a lot of us that may never, ever. So to Pastor Galloway's point, he had members of his congregation that may never return. So that's why the question comes, what does it look like? At what point do you say, okay, we got the all clear? I don't know that you will ever see something that says we have the all clear. There are people that will forever mask up going forward because of how traumatized and how devastated COVID-19 was when it hit. So that is my point. And at this time, we're certainly not seeing the level of devastation we did when COVID-19 was rampant.
But we are. We literally are. I love you, Dr. Mack, but we literally are seeing that 2,300 people dying a day. That's what we have not had a phase where we had a sustained level of 2,200 people dying a day at any phase. Like the volume of death has increased.
You have to show me that at the height, when Governor Cuomo was reporting from New York, you have to show me that at one point we were far beyond 2,300 deaths a day. We were way above that. I'm saying a day. Ben. So you know,
I'm going to put a pin there. I'm going to put a pin there because that's a point of clarification that we need to get before we can have a meaningful conversation past that.
For a while, Ben Dixon.
Say that again.
I've been asking you for that clarification for a while.
Man, you got the same Google I got. Ask your Google assistant over there.